The stars had always been silent. For 300 years, humanity spread across 17 star systems, building colonies on distant worlds, mining asteroids, and creating new homes among the cold darkness of space. They searched for other life but found nothing. Many believed they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. Admiral Park Daho stood on the bridge of the carrier, indomitable, watching the morning shift change when the alarms began. 3 massive shapes appeared on the sensors, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The ships were strange and beautiful, covered in patterns that seemed to glow with inner light. They hung above Earth like gods looking down at insects. "All hands to battle stations," Daho ordered, though he knew his weapons would do nothing against vessels of that size. His heart beat fast, but his voice stayed calm. He had commanded ships for 30 years. He would not show fear to his crew. The message came moments later. It was broadcast on every frequency, translated into every human language. The voice was cold and mechanical. "Attention species designated human, you have been discovered by the galactic hegemony. We have ruled this galaxy for 40,000 years. We represent 12 great species. You will now receive our terms. You will submit to hegemony rule and serve as a lesser species. You will provide workers and resources as we demand. You will abandon all weapons and military vessels. Failure to accept these terms will result in your complete destruction. You have 1 rotation of your planet to decide. There is no negotiation." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. On Earth, President Yoon Soo-ji watched the message with growing horror. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but she had led humanity through 2 colonial rebellions and a resource war. She had never faced anything like this. She called an emergency meeting. Military commanders, scientists, diplomats, and advisors filled the Great Hall within hours. They argued through the night. Some wanted to surrender immediately. The enemy was too powerful, too advanced. Fighting would only bring death. Others refused to accept slavery. Better to die free than live as servants to alien masters. Dr. Kwan Hien listened to the arguments with growing frustration. He was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied theories about alien life. Now that aliens had actually appeared, everyone ignored the scientists. They were too busy being afraid. "May I speak?" he finally asked. The room fell quiet. President Yoon nodded. "I have analyzed their message very carefully," Hien said. "There is something strange about it. They said, we can submit or be destroyed. They said there is no negotiation. But they also said something very interesting. They said they have never encountered a species that chose war." The room was silent. "Think about what that means," Hien continued. "Every species they have ever met chose to surrender. Not one ever fought back. In 40,000 years, why would they need to mention that unless they expected us to do the same? What if they have never actually fought a real war?" Admiral Park Daho leaned forward. "Are you saying their military might be weak?" "I am saying we do not know," Hyun replied. "We assume they are powerful because they have ruled for so long. But what if they ruled because no one ever challenged them?" President Yoon considered this. "We need information. We cannot make this decision blind." She turned to Daho. "Can we send a reconnaissance team past their blockade?" "It would be extremely dangerous," the admiral said. Then he paused. "My daughter is our best pilot. She has volunteered." Lieutenant Park Myrae was 28 years old, with sharp eyes and her father's steady nerves. She took a small scout ship, painted black to avoid detection, and slipped past the alien vessels. Her mission was simple: observe the enemy, and report back. What she found changed everything. The hegemony fleet orbited Earth in perfect formation. But Myrae noticed something odd. Their ships never changed position. Their weapons never moved. Their shields flickered in patterns that suggested old technology poorly maintained. She hacked into their communication systems using methods they had no defense against. The aliens were not preparing for war. They were not running combat drills or loading weapons. They were arguing about schedules and supplies. Some were complaining about being away from home. Their military channels were filled with boredom, not readiness. Myrae dug deeper. She found historical records, training manuals, fleet reports, What she read made her breath catch in her throat. The hegemony had not fought a war in 8,000 years. Their last conflict was so long ago that it was taught as ancient history. Their soldiers trained against simulations, and those simulations were designed to make them feel successful. Their weapons were ceremonial. Their tactics existed only in theory, never tested against real enemies. They had grown soft, comfortable. They had forgotten what war actually meant. Mireille returned to Earth with her report. The council gathered again to hear her findings. Their ships are larger than ours, she explained, but they are slower and less maneuverable. Their shields are powerful, but use old designs we can exploit. Their soldiers have never seen real combat. They have never faced an enemy willing to fight. Admiral Deho studied the data. This is incredible. If this is accurate, it is accurate, Mireille said. I saw it myself. They are not warriors. They are bureaucrats with ships. The room erupted in discussion. Some remained cautious. The risks were enormous. Others saw opportunity. President Yoon raised her hand for silence. She walked to the window and looked up at the sky, where the alien vessels waited for humanity's answer. For 40,000 years, she said quietly, every species they met chose fear. They chose survival over pride. They knelt and became slaves. She turned back to face the room. What do we choose? General Baek Jawan, the old commander of Earth's ground forces, stood slowly. His body was scarred from 3 wars. His voice was rough. I did not spend my life defending humanity so we could surrender to the first bully who showed up at our door. One by one, others stood with him. President Yoon nodded. She had her answer. Contact the alien vessels, she ordered. Tell them we have made our decision. The hegemony ambassador appeared on screen, tall and insectoid, with eyes that showed no emotion. You have considered our terms? President Yoon stood straight. Her voice did not shake. We have. And our answer is this. We do not submit. We do not surrender. If the galaxy demands conflict, then humanity declares war. The ambassador stared at her. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then something strange happened. Something the ambassador had never felt in her long life. Fear. The ambassador's confusion was almost funny. She stood frozen on the screen, her many legs twitching in what humans would later learn was a sign of deep distress. In 40,000 years of hegemony rule, no species had ever refused their terms. The possibility had not been considered. There was no protocol for this. You cannot be serious, the ambassador finally said. You are one species. We are 12. You have 200 ships. We have millions. This is not a war. This is suicide. President Yoon Suji smiled. It was not a kind smile. Then you have nothing to worry about. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the recording in shock. The primitive species from the distant spiral arm had just challenged the greatest power in existence. Most expected them to be destroyed within days. Admiral Park Dae-ho did not wait for the enemy to attack. He immediately began reorganizing the fleet for combat operations. Every ship was equipped with the best weapons available. Every crew trained for battle day and night. He knew they were outnumbered, but numbers were not everything. Cannot fight their war, he told his officers. We must make them fight ours. Speed, surprise, aggression. Hit them before they know we are there. Disappear before they can respond. Make them afraid of every shadow. General Baek Juan mobilized the ground forces across all 17 human colonies. Soldiers who had trained for theoretical conflicts now prepared for real ones. Factories that built civilian goods switched to producing weapons and armor. The entire species transformed from peaceful explorers to warriors in a matter of weeks. Dr. Kwan Heen led a team of scientists. Studying every piece of hegemony technology they could find, the aliens had left behind communication devices, scanner readings, and small artifacts from their brief contact. Hyun took them apart piece by piece, learning their secrets. What he discovered was remarkable. Human technology was different from hegemony technology, not worse. Human ships used fusion reactors that burned hotter and more efficient. Human weapons used principles the aliens had never explored. In some ways, humanity was actually more advanced. They stopped improving, Heian explained to the council. Why would they improve when no one ever challenged them? They built ships to intimidate, not to fight. We built ships to survive. That difference matters. Meanwhile, on the hegemony capital world, panic was spreading. The ruling council, 12 representatives from the 12 ruling species, demanded answers. How could this happen? How could primitives refuse them? High Commander Velith was summoned to explain. He was a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, considered the greatest military mind in the hegemony. He had spent his entire life studying wars that happened before he was born. The humans are dangerous, he warned. Not because they are strong, but because they are different. They have been fighting wars among themselves for their entire history. Every generation has known conflict. They have practiced what we have only theorized. The council was not impressed. Send a fleet, they ordered. Destroy a few of their worlds. They will surrender quickly enough when they see their colonies burning. Velith wanted to argue, but he had no authority to refuse. He sent the order. The first battle happened at the colony of New Busan. It was a peaceful world of rolling hills and blue oceans. Home to 3 million humans. When the hegemony fleet arrived, 50 warships strong, they expected an easy victory. Captain Kong Taemin commanded the Human Defense Force. He had only 12 destroyers, old ships with tired crews. By all logic, he should have retreated. Instead, he ordered his squadron to attack. The hegemony commanders watched in disbelief as the tiny human ships charged directly at them. This was not how battles worked. Weaker forces were supposed to run or surrender. No one attacked against impossible odds. Taemin's ships were fast and nimble. They dove between the massive hegemony vessels, firing at close range where the alien shields were weakest. The humans moved with precision, each ship covering the others, attacking in patterns that seemed almost beautiful. The alien commanders tried to respond, but their orders were slow. Their ships could not turn fast enough. Their weapons could not track targets moving so quickly. They had trained against simulations that moved predictably. The humans did not move predictably. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, all 50 hegemony ships were destroyed or captured. Not a single human vessel was lost. Captain Taemin stood on his bridge, breathing hard, unable to believe what had just happened. His hands were shaking. Around him, his crew cheered and cried. "Send the report to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them we won." The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The impossible had happened. The mighty hegemony had been defeated by a species they considered primitive. Footage of the battle played on every world, watched by billions of beings who had lived their entire lives under hegemony rule. For the first time, those beings began to wonder. If the humans could win, perhaps resistance was possible. Perhaps the hegemony was not invincible after all. Lieutenant Park Murray was assigned a new mission. She led a small team to infiltrate a hegemony supply station, hoping to gather more intelligence. What they found was even more valuable than information. The station was defended by hegemony soldiers, members of a species called the Kalani. When Moray's team encountered a patrol, she expected a fight. Instead, the soldiers froze. Their weapons hung unused at their sides. Their eyes were wide with terror. They had never seen real combat. Their entire training was simulations against enemies programmed to lose, facing actual humans, beings who moved like predators and showed no fear. They simply stopped functioning. Murray captured them without firing a shot. She interrogated the prisoners carefully, trying to understand. What she learned was disturbing. The hegemony controlled its population through more than just force. They used genetic manipulation, subtle changes to the DNA of conquered species that made them passive and obedient. Generations of Kalani had been bred to serve, their natural aggression removed, their will to fight erased. Humans had never been exposed to this manipulation. Their aggression, their will to fight, their stubbornness remained intact. In the eyes of the hegemony, these traits made them dangerous primitives. In truth, these traits made them warriors. Murray returned to Earth with her report and her prisoners. The colony soldiers were treated well, better than they had ever been treated by their masters. Some of them began to ask questions. Why did the humans fight? What did they believe in? Why did they refuse to surrender? The answers confused them. Freedom, pride, the right to choose their own future. These concepts had been erased from their culture thousands of years ago. But somewhere deep inside them, something stirred. Something old and forgotten. Hope. On the hegemony capital. High Commander Veleth reviewed the battle reports with growing despair. He had warned them. He had told them the humans were different. Now 50 ships were gone. The humans had not lost a single vessel. He sent a new warning to the Council. We cannot defeat humanity through force. They are built for war in ways we are not. We must find another way. The Council read his message and deleted it. They had ruled for 40,000 years. They would not be defeated by primitives. They would send more ships. They would send thousands. They would learn. 6 months after the declaration of war, humanity was no longer defending. They were attacking. Admiral Parkdeho unveiled his master plan, called Operation Starfall. The idea was simple, but bold. Instead of waiting for the hegemony to come to them, human forces would strike at the enemy's most important targets: shipyards, supply bases, communication hubs. Cut the enemy's ability to make war, and the war would end. Commodore Shin Young-ji was chosen to lead the Second Fleet. She was 40 years old, a thin woman with sharp features and a mind that never stopped calculating. Other officers followed rules and standard tactics. Young-ji broke rules and invented tactics. Her first target was a cluster of hegemony shipyards in a system called Vantrise. These yards produced hundreds of warships each year. Destroying them would cripple the enemy's ability to replace losses. The shipyards were defended by 300 vessels. Young-ji had 60. Any normal commander would have considered attack impossible. Young-ji attacked at night, not real night, of course. There was no night in space. But the hegemony kept schedules, regular periods when fewer crew were awake, when sensors were monitored by tired operators, when attention was low. Young-ji studied their patterns for weeks, learning exactly when they were most vulnerable. Her ships appeared from behind a gas giant, using its gravity to hide their approach. They struck the first shipyard before alarms could sound. The second yard was burning before the defenders organized. By the time the hegemony fleet responded, 4 shipyards were destroyed and Young-ji's ships had already disappeared. She repeated this pattern across the sector. Strike fast, cause maximum damage, vanish before the enemy could react. The hegemony had never faced such tactics. Their commanders tried to predict where she would attack next, but Young-ji was unpredictable. She attacked targets that made no strategic sense, drawing defenders away from real objectives. She sent false signals, made the enemy see threats that did not exist in 3 months. She captured or destroyed 17 shipyards. The hegemony's ship production dropped by 40%. On occupied worlds, a different kind of war was being fought. Colonel Ojinsu commanded the Human Liberation Forces, soldiers trained to free planets held by the hegemony. Their mission was not just to defeat the enemy, but to win the support of conquered species. The first liberated world was called Moroth. Its people, the Moroth, had been slaves for 6,000 years. They worked in mines and factories, producing resources for their masters. They had forgotten what freedom meant. When human soldiers landed, the Moroth were afraid. They had been told terrible stories about the human primitives, warnings that these creatures were violent and cruel. They expected to be treated badly. Instead, the humans gave them food. They treated their sick. They spoke to them with respect. Sergeant Bei Yujin was a medic attached to the Liberation Force. She noticed that the Moroth moved slowly, thought slowly, seemed almost sleepy. Their eyes were dull. Their voices were quiet. Something was wrong with them. She took blood samples and sent them to Dr. Quan Han for analysis. What he discovered was horrifying. The hegemony had modified Moroth genetics thousands of years ago. They had removed the chemicals in their brains that caused strong emotions, quick thinking, and the desire to resist. The Morith had been turned into perfect slaves, too passive to rebel, too slow to escape. He had worked day and night to develop a treatment. It was complex and risky, but it could reverse the damage. Eugene administered the first doses to volunteers. The results were remarkable. Within weeks, the treated Morith began to change. Their eyes became brighter. Their movements became faster. They asked questions. They laughed. They grew angry when they learned what had been done to them, and they wanted revenge. Word spread across the galaxy. The humans were not just fighting the hegemony. They were freeing the slaves. They were healing the broken. Species that had forgotten hope began to remember it. Volunteers arrived from everywhere. The Morith formed their own fighting units, humans training them in combat. The colony prisoners that Murray had captured asked to join the human cause. Other species, ones the humans had never met, sent messages of support. The hegemony began to lose control of its own territory. Slave uprisings erupted on dozens of worlds. Supply lines were cut by rebels who knew every secret path and hidden tunnel. The mighty empire was being eaten from inside. High Commander Velith watched the reports with grim understanding. He had studied human history. He knew what they were doing. They were not just fighting a war. They were starting a revolution. He requested an audience with the ruling council. This time, they listened. The humans are not our greatest threat, he explained. The ideas they spree. Dr. Every species we have conquered is watching. They see humans winning battles. They see freed slaves fighting beside their liberators. They begin to wonder why they cannot do the same. The council was worried. What do you suggest? We must end this war quickly, Velith said. Not by defeating the humans, but by showing the galaxy that resistance is hopeless. We need a victory so complete, so devastating, that no one will ever dare challenge us again, the council agreed. They gathered every available ship, the largest fleet assembled in 8,000 years, 2,000 warships, 10 million soldiers, enough firepower to burn worlds. Their target was the human colony of New Daegu. It was one of the largest human settlements, home to 7 million people. Destroying it would break human morale and show the galaxy the cost of resistance. Velith did not like the plan. He knew the humans would fight harder after such an attack, not surrender. But the council did not care about his opinions. They wanted results. The fleet launched. 2,000 ships, darkening the stars. Moving toward New Daegu like a wave of death. Admiral Park Daeho received the intelligence report and felt his heart sink. He had known this moment would come. The enemy was finally taking the war seriously. They were sending a force that could not be stopped. He had a choice. He could evacuate New Daegu and let the colony fall. 7 million people would become refugees, but they would live. His fleet would survive to fight another day, or he could defend the colony. Face the enemy with everything he had. Almost certainly die. He thought of his daughter Murray, now commanding her own ship. He thought of the people on New Daegu, families and children who trusted him to protect them. He thought of every species watching, waiting to see what humanity would do. He made his choice. All ships, he ordered. Set course for New Daegu. We will meet the enemy there. His officers exchanged looks. They knew the odds. They followed the order anyway. The greatest battle of the war was about to begin, the hegemony. The fleet arrived at New Daegu like a metal storm. 2,000 warships filled the sky, blocking out the stars. The people on the planet looked up and saw death approaching. Governor Imsera ordered evacuation immediately. But she knew the math. She had 7 million people and transport ships for 2 million. The enemy would arrive in 18 hours. There was no way to save everyone. She made the hardest decision of her life. Children first, then the elderly and sick, then everyone else, as many as possible. The rest would have to hope. Hope arrived in the form of Admiral Park Daeho and the human fleet. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. 180 human ships against 2,000 enemy vessels. By any reasonable calculation, they could not win. They came anyway. Daeho positioned his fleet between the enemy and the planet. He opened a channel to all his crews. "I will not lie to you," he said. "Many of us will not survive this battle, but 7 million people are counting on us. Every minute we fight is another minute for transports to escape. Every ship we destroy is one less that can threaten our homes. We hold the line. We do not retreat. We show them what humanity is." The crews responded with cheers. They were afraid, but they were ready. The battle began at dawn. The hegemony commander, a Valeri noble named Eroth, expected the humans to break quickly. His fleet had overwhelming firepower. His victory was certain. He ordered his ships to advance in standard formation, a wall of metal and energy that would sweep the defenders away. The humans did not cooperate. They split into small groups, diving into gaps in the enemy formation. They targeted engines and communication arrays, causing chaos instead of seeking kills. They drew enemy ships out of position, then concentrated fire to destroy them before help could arrive. Captain Kong Timan, the hero of New Busan, led the most aggressive attacks. His destroyer group struck at the enemy flagship, dodging fire from dozens of ships, refusing to retreat no matter how close death came. "Keep firing," he ordered as his ship shook from impacts. They have to protect their commander. Every ship guarding him is one ship not shooting at the transports. The transports launched from the planet in waves, carrying hundreds of thousands of people to safety. The evacuation was working, but it was slow. Too slow. Commodore Shin Yunji arrived with reinforcements, 40 ships from her raiding fleet. She saw the battle and immediately understood the strategy. "We need to slow them down," she told her crews. "Make them careful. Make them hesitate." She ordered her ships to attack the enemy rear, threatening their supply vessels. It was insane, flying past 2,000 warships to attack the support fleet. It was also effective. Commander Eroth had to divert ships to protect his supplies. Weakening his main attack, the battle stretched from hours into days. Neither side rested. Humans fought until their ships were crippled, then kept fighting. They used escape pods as weapons, crashing them into enemy vessels. They transferred crews to damaged ships and sent them back into combat. The hegemony lost hundreds of ships. They had never suffered such casualties. They had never faced an enemy that simply refused to die. Lieutenant Park Murray commanded the frigate Starbreaker. She watched the battle unfold and saw an opportunity. The enemy flagship was exposed, its escorts pulled away to deal with other threats. If she could reach it, capture the enemy commander, the battle might end. She told no one her plan. They would have tried to stop her. Her ship dove through the chaos, dodging fire, accelerating toward the massive flagship. Enemy vessels tried to intercept, but Murray was faster. She reached the flagship and fired grappling lines, locking her small frigate to the giant ship. "Boarding party, follow me." She ordered 30 humans in combat armor breach the flagship's hull and fought through its corridors. The alien crew had never faced boarders. They had never been trained for close combat. They died in waves. Murray reached the command center in 20 minutes. Commander Eroth waited there, surrounded by his final guards. He was a tall creature with pale skin and too many eyes. He held a ceremonial weapon he had never fired. "Surrender," Murray said. Eroth stared at her. This small human, covered in alien blood, standing in his sacred command center. A primitive, a lesser being. He raised his weapon. Murray shot him in the arm before he could aim. He fell, screaming. "I said surrender," she repeated. He surrendered. The news spread through the hegemony fleet. Their commander was captured. Their flagship was taken. The symbols of their power were in human hands. Panic set in. Ships began to retreat without orders. The formation collapsed. What had been an overwhelming attack became a chaotic rout. But victory came with terrible cost. Admiral Park Daeho's flagship had been targeted throughout the battle. A direct hit breached the hull, flooding the bridge with fire and debris. Daeho was thrown across the room, his body broken. His crew pulled him from the wreckage. He was still alive, but barely. Blood covered his face. His breathing was shallow. "The battle," he whispered, Did we win? Yes, Admiral. The enemy is retreating, he smiled. Good, good. He coughed blood. Tell my Ray. Tell my daughter. I am proud. He died holding his command badge, the symbol of everything he had given for his species. The Battle of New Daegu was over. 5 million civilians escaped. 104 human ships were destroyed. 20,000 soldiers died. Admiral Park Dae-ho died, but the hegemony lost over 1,000 ships. Their commander was captured. Their fleet was broken. Across the galaxy, the news spread. The humans had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. President Yoon Suk-yi addressed the human colonies that night. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was strong. We have lost many today, she said. Admiral Dae-ho, Captain Teeman, who gave his life protecting a civilian transport. Thousands of others who stood between our enemy and our families. We will honor them. We will remember them. But we will not stop. They believed we would break. They were wrong. They demanded conflict. Now they will learn why that was the greatest mistake in galactic history. The Morith, watching the broadcast, knelt in respect. The Kalani lowered their heads. Species across the galaxy who had suffered under hegemony rule saw the human president and felt something they had not felt in generations. They felt hope. They felt anger. They felt ready to fight. On the hegemony capital, High Commander Velith received the battle reports with grim acceptance. He had warned them. He had told them the humans were different. Now he began planning for what he knew was coming. The humans would not stop at defense. They would attack. They would come for the capital itself. And he was no longer sure the hegemony could stop them, 1 year after humanity declared war. The Allied fleet gathered at the edge of hegemony space. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Admiral Park. Murray stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Dae-ho, named for her father. Around her waited 3,000 warships. Half were human. The other half belonged to species that had joined the Alliance. Races freed from hegemony slavery. Peoples who had found hope in humanity's example. The Morith sent 500 vessels, crewed by beings who had awakened from thousands of years of forced sleep. Their anger burned cold and steady. The Kalani contributed 300 ships, soldiers who had learned to fight from their human teachers. The Vostari, the Ramath, the countless others who had suffered under hegemony rule. All came to end the empire that had oppressed them. Beside Murray stood Dr. Quan Heen, now the Alliance's chief science advisor. His treatments had freed millions of minds. His research had given them weapons to match any enemy. He was no soldier, but he had done more for victory than any fleet. General Baek Ju-won commanded the ground forces. 2 million soldiers, ready to liberate the hegemony capital. Many were not human. Species that had been slaves now fought as equals. The general had trained them himself, teaching them that courage mattered more than species. Admiral, her communications officer, reported, "We are receiving a transmission from the capital. It is High Commander Velith." Velith appeared on the screen. He looked tired, old. The war had aged him. "Admiral Park," he said, "I must speak with you." Murray studied him carefully. This was the enemy commander, the greatest military mind the hegemony had produced. She had expected threats, demands, perhaps an offer of negotiation. Instead, Velith asked a simple question. "What do you want?" Murray had prepared for many things. She had prepared for battle, for death, for victory and defeat. She had not prepared for this question asked with genuine curiosity. "We want the hegemony to end," she said. "Not its people, not its worlds, but the system that made slaves of entire species, the genetic manipulation, the crushing of free will. That must end. And if we refuse, then we will end it ourselves." Velith was silent for a long moment. Then he did something remarkable. He nodded. "I have studied your species," he said. "I have read your history, learned your wars, tried to understand what makes you different. You have a saying? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. We do. The hegemony forgot its history, Velith said. We forgot that power requires vigilance. We forgot that peace requires justice. We built an empire on slavery and called it civilization. You have reminded us what we forgot. For that, I thank you. Murray did not know how to respond. The ruling council will not surrender, Velith continued. They have held power for generations. They cannot imagine losing it. They will order me to fight to the last ship, to burn our own worlds rather than let them fall to you. And will you? Velith straightened. No, I will not. The transmission ended. What happened next would be remembered for centuries. High Commander Velith, the greatest military leader the hegemony had ever known, refused the council's orders. He announced that the war was lost, that continued fighting would only bring more death. He called for peace. The ruling council called him a traitor. They ordered his arrest, but Velith had prepared. Officers loyal to him seized key positions. Ships under his command turned their weapons toward the council's forces. For the first time in 40,000 years, the hegemony turned on itself. Civil war erupted on the capital world. The old guard, desperate to maintain their power, fought against those who saw the truth. Velith led the reformers, using everything he had learned from studying human tactics. The Allied fleet held position, watching. Many urged Murray to intervene, to strike while the enemy fought itself. She refused. This is their fight, she said. They must choose their own future. We cannot force freedom on them. They must want it. For 3 weeks, the capital burned. The old council called for help from other hegemony worlds, but none came. Their subjects had seen humans win impossible victories. They had seen freed slaves fight beside their liberators. They no longer believed the hegemony was invincible. The reformers won. The ruling council was captured. Thousands of years of tyranny ended not with alien invasion, but with internal revolution. High Commander. Yes. Velith contacted Murray once more. This time he spoke as a changed being. We request an armistice, he said. We accept your terms. The hegemony is ended. The Treaty of New Dawn was signed on the anniversary of humanity's declaration of war. President Yoon Soo-ji sat across from Velith and representatives of the former ruling species. Dr. Kwan. Hain was there to ensure genetic manipulation programs were destroyed. General Baek Juan attended to discuss the transition of military forces. Admiral Park My-rae signed for the Alliance fleet. She wrote her name next to her father's title, honoring his memory. The hegemony was dissolved. In its place rose the Galactic Cooperative, a true alliance of equal species. No masters, no slaves. Every world had a voice. Every being had rights. Humanity took its place, not as conqueror, but as partner. They had proven their strength. Now, they proved their wisdom, sharing power instead of taking it. President Yoon Soo-ji gave her final address as war leader. She stood before cameras that broadcast to 1,000 worlds. They demanded conflict, she said. We answered. But war was never our purpose. It was our proof. Proof that we would not kneel. Proof that freedom is worth any price. The galaxy knows now what humanity is. Let them never forget. She paused. But now comes the harder work. Building peace. Healing wounds. Creating a future where our children and their children can live without fear. This is the true challenge. I believe we are ready for it. Across liberated worlds, statues rose to human heroes. Admiral Park Dae-ho, Captain Kung Temin, the thousands who gave everything. The Marith composed songs of gratitude. The Kalani named their children after human soldiers who died freeing them. Sergeant Bae Yujin continued her work, traveling from world to world, healing those still suffering from genetic manipulation. She became a symbol of humanity's compassion. Proof that the warriors could also be healers. Commodore Shin Yeonji retired from military service to teach at the new Light Academy. Her tactics were studied by officers of every species. Her unconventional thinking became orthodox wisdom. Dr. Kwan Haean led the Galactic Science Council, ensuring that knowledge was used to help, never to enslave. Under his guidance, medical advances spread to every world, and Admiral Park Murray returned to teaching, training the next generation of officers. Her classroom held students of every species, human and Morith, and Kalani and Valeri. Former enemies learning together. The galaxy demanded conflict, she told them on the first day. We responded. We discovered our strength. Now we must discover something harder. How to build peace. How to trust. How to become one people from many? She looked at their faces, so different from each other, all watching her with hope. My father gave his life for this moment, she said. So did many others. They believed in something greater than themselves. They believed that the universe could be better, that we could make it better, she smiled. It was a warm smile, full of hard-won wisdom. Let us prove them right. Outside the academy, the stars burned bright and silent. They had watched empires rise and fall for billions of years. They had seen species conquer and enslave and destroy. Now they watched something new, something rare. They watched beings of different worlds, different bodies, different histories. Choosing to build instead of burn, the galaxy had demanded conflict. Humanity had responded, and in responding, they had changed everything.